right. Well, it is great to see everybody. It's been a few months since we've done our last Lakeside Chat, but we thought that it would be important to bring it back and have LPL hear from LPL about their cybersecurity. So today we have Mike Terry joining us. Mike is a senior analyst on the advisor security team, and he's been at LPL for almost 8 years already. He was just telling us that he has done over 300 of these presentations. So obviously there's a lot of interest and need around surrounding cybersecurity. And actually, I just got a call from a client earlier this week about this stuff. So it's a great topic and one that we definitely want to keep on bringing to everybody just because we want you to stay protected and then also to have an idea of how LPL is safeguarding your sensitive information. So, Mike, we will let you take it away and thank you for agreeing to be with us today.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Mike Terry. I work at LPL on the Advisor and Investor Security team, and boy, oh boy, I'm pretty excited to be here today. So I think I just want to start by saying thank you, right? Just thank you for taking some time out of your schedule. Time is probably the most valuable commodity that we have, and so the fact that you took some time today to learn about cybersecurity, it means a lot to me. The goal for today's webinar is pretty simple, right? I want to provide you with information that's easily digestible and that you can implement in your personal life so that you can, stay a little bit safer. So this is going to be pretty informal of a chat. At the end, we will open it up. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have at the end. Be happy to answer them. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So let's just review the agenda for today. I'll start by talking about how your information stays protected. From there, we'll talk about and introduce some different cyber attacks and scams so that you're familiar with them and able to identify and avoid them. And then to conclude the webinar, I'll provide you with some useful information as far as with securing your accounts, protecting your information, protecting your identity, and protecting your family as well. Hope that sounds all right. Let's go ahead and get started. And I think it's important that we just start by talking about what cybersecurity is, right? It's terminology that you hear used pretty frequently. What we're really talking about when we're discussing cybersecurity, we're talking about protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access. And it's important to you, and you should care about this because the information that we're referencing is going to belong to you, right? And so that information is very valuable to bad actors. Once they're able to access that information, they'll be able to use it to commit fraud. So if we take a look on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have some different cyber attacks here, and we're really going to focus on the first three, right? Hacktivism, cybercrime, and that insider threat that relates to angry or disgruntled employees. So the espionage, terrorism, and warfare attacks are quite frankly going to be highly sophisticated, highly complex attacks that are going to have impact here within our country to critical infrastructure or elsewhere across the world. So luckily for us and luckily for Christina and the team, right, these types of attacks aren't going to be targeted directly at us. So we're going to focus on social engineering today. Before we get to those attacks, though, I think it's important that we just talk about kind of how your information stays protected, right? So we understand that these are your accounts, and within these accounts, it's going to be your sensitive information, right? So it's going to have your personal information related to the account opening process, as well as your assets are going to be included in those accounts as well, right? And so our goal, as well as with the Clute Wealth Management team, is to ensure that information stays protected and that it's not accessed in any unauthorized manner. So one of the things we do here at LPL is we work hand in hand with, a lot of our advisors' offices, right? And the Clute Wealth Management team is no exception to that, right? So every year we provide the team with recurring trainings that educate them about different cyber threats, provide them with useful information that they can use to identify and avoid cyber attacks as well. And then we have a personal relationships with a lot of our offices, and this office is no exception to that either. We were just talking beforehand about different things as we connected, and we've had different communications leading up to this webinar, right? And all that communication has been pleasant. And so Christine and the team, they know if they do have specific questions related to cybersecurity, or if questions arise right after this webinar, feel free to reach out to them and they can contact us and we'll be happy to answer those questions. And lastly, we want to provide them with secure financial tools so that they can continue to focus on what matters most, right? And that's satisfying you, their client, and making sure that your requests and needs are taken care of. And then here at LPL, we kind of work behind the scenes, right? We have a dedicated cyber staff working hard to identify different cyber threats. Once those cyber threats have been identified, we're actually going to proactively reach out to any impacted advisor, provide them with different guidance on things that they can do to kind of successfully navigate that process. And then if there is an incident that occurs, right, we do have cyber insurance available to help advisors, with any incidents that occur. So at a high level, I think this is kind of the ecosystem that's in place, right, regarding your accounts, uh, and regarding the Clute Wealth Management team, right, with Christina and Adam, and then with LPL as well. All right, one thing I also wanted to mention was LPL's cyber fraud guarantee, right? So this is actually posted publicly on our website, and it states that we'll reimburse you for 100% of any realized losses that occur directly as any unauthorized access to an LPL system and impacts your account. And honestly, that's no different than the way that we've done business for years, but we did want to have something publicly facing, right? So that advisors could reference it, their clients could reference it, and then any prospective clients would be able to reference it as well. So if you're interested in learning more about cybersecurity or about that cyber fraud guarantee, I recommend that you, at your leisure, you can go to our website at lpl.com and go to the security and privacy page to learn more about that. Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about cyber attacks and scams. And as I mentioned before, we're going to start by talking about social engineering. So when we talk about social engineering, we're really talking about attacks that are designed to take advantage of human emotions. So what exactly does that mean? These attacks won't work without you having some sort of reaction, right? Clicking on a link or opening an attachment oftentimes. And so we'll start there when we talk about phishing. And when we reference phishing, I can assure you we're not talking about that activity that involves a rod or a reel, right, or a boat and bait. We're actually talking about emails. And so these emails are sent to large groups of people. And the goal is to get the recipient to click on a link or to open an attachment. Sometimes we're even seeing these bad actors modify their attacks where they have phone numbers included. And so the goal is to get the victim to call a phone number. If the victim clicks on a link or open the attachment from that phishing email, ransomware can get deployed. So what ransomware is, it's going to be malware or a virus that once deployed, it's essentially going to lock you out of the files on your device. So you'll be able to see them, but when you go to open them, you won't be able to because they're locked or encrypted. And the only way to access those files is going to be with a decryption key. And that decryption key is held by those bad actors. And so they're going to request a payment in exchange for that decryption key. Oftentimes that payment is going to be in the form of Bitcoin, electronic payment. And so that's why these attacks are called ransomware, right? Because of that ransom request. Scams we see packaged hand in hand with phishing attacks oftentimes. And so with scams, bad actors will create these to try to access sensitive information that they can use for fraud. And depending on the type of scam is going to depend on, what information they're trying to access, whether it be personal, financial, or even proprietary, if they are looking to, do a scam on a corporation or a business. And then lastly, we want to talk about email impersonations or email compromise. So this is something that's really impactful when you think about it from three different segments, right? So you have your personal emails, you have work emails, and then there are businesses or third parties, those email addresses as well. So when we start by talking about your personal email addresses, oftentimes those email addresses may not have appropriate controls in place, right? You may have a lax password. You may not have, multi-factor authentication established on the account. We'll talk more about why those are important to have later on, right? But if that email address is compromised, that bad actor could then do keyword searches to locate sensitive information or even reply back to existing conversations imitating you in an attempt to commit fraud, right? And so that is one scam that does have success. And here at LPL, we talked about how we educate our advisors, right? So the Clute Wealth Management team knows anytime they receive a money movement request from you, right? A request to move funds from your account, they're going to call you someone will speak with you as well to verify that it is a legitimate request for processing that transaction. Looks like we're having a bit of feedback, so I will ask if you are attending, if you're able to just mute
Someone
yourself,
tries to make a
that
change,
may
take something
that
out,
may help us.
it's first. Yeah.
So we talked
So,
about business email addresses as well. Let's talk about, I'm sorry, personal email addresses. Now let's talk about those business email addresses, right? So business email addresses can get compromised as well. Those bad actors would then be able to imitate, a known party or a colleague or a coworker within the business to be able to commit fraud. And then with those third parties or those businesses, if those email addresses are compromised, we see those packaged hand in hand a lot of times with invoice scams where individuals will receive email communication about services that may not have been provided and a request to make a payment for that. So at a high level, these are some different social engineering attacks, and it's very important, to be wary of these, and we'll talk more about identifying and avoiding these attacks now. So when we talk about emails, there's oftentimes going to be common indicators associated with these phishing emails, right? Could be an unusual request from an unknown source. It could be an email from a known source for someone that you're familiar with that has an unfamiliar tone to it. We talked about the emails including those links or attachments included in them as well. One thing I want to reference is going to be any inconsistencies that may be included as far as with the email address or the domain name associated with the email. And this is definitely going to be prevalent when we're talking about checking emails on our phones or our mobile devices, right? Because when you get an email on your phone, oftentimes what occurs is you're just going to see the name of the sender, right? So what we're going to recommend you do is you actually click on the name of the sender and then thoroughly review the email address associated with the name. And that's where we're going to ask you to kind of do some research, right? The name of the email address, as well as, the name of the sender and the information associated with the email address, as well as the domain, they should match, right? And if there are any inconsistencies, that's when we recommend you either delete that email from your inbox, and then when you delete it from your inbox, you can delete it from the recycle bin as well. We call that double deleting. Or another option would be to block that sender. So you can simply mark it as junk and block the sender, and that's going to prevent any additional emails from coming from that specific email address. Now, in the past, as we mentioned, there were a lot of different common indicators associated with these emails. With the advent of, tools like generative AI, what we're seeing now are emails that don't necessarily have any of these common indicators in them, right? So that's why we always recommend, if it's an email from an unknown source that has a sense of urgency associated with it, that you proceed forward extremely cautiously. So now we're talking about some additional phishing scams. I talked about what phishing was earlier. Let's talk about smishing. So this is going to be phishing attacks that occur via text messages. And I myself actually fell victim to one of these attacks a few years ago before I actually got into security, I'll say. But what happened was I was returning from a trip out of town, and I received a text message to my phone from an unknown phone number requesting that I verify banking transactions. And so to me, it made sense, right? I had a different spending pattern than normal from being out of town. And I just went ahead and clicked on the link where it took me to a landing page, and it requested that I entered my username, my password, and my PIN number, right? So that should have been that aha moment for me, that red flag when they requested such sensitive information as a PIN number. I wasn't as familiar as I mentioned now, so I entered the information, I hit submit, and I thought, this is strange, right? Nothing happened. Let me enter all my information again. And so I entered the information again. I hit submit, and my heart sunk for a moment, right? And the reason why was because I was able to identify a small anomaly regarding the spelling, on that landing page. And so I went to try to access my account, and unfortunately at that time, I couldn't even access my account, right? My information had already been changed. I couldn't call that company and go through the verification process because I didn't know the answers to the questions that they were asking me based off of the changes made to my account. So I had to go through that process of going to that actual bank that next day with my ID to submit a claim and reclaim access back to my account. So this is just one example, right, as far as what the impacts of, one of these attacks can occur. So as it relates to these smishing attacks, some common indicators that we're seeing is large companies are no longer, I shouldn't say no longer, but we're seeing less and less instances where large companies are contacting their victims using the normal phone number, right, with the 10 digits, right, the area code and subsequent 7 digits. What we're seeing more now are these large companies contacting individuals with a 5 or 6-digit phone number. So that could be that indicator that is a legitimate interaction. But one thing that we'd recommend is if that you do receive a text message from a phone number that you're unfamiliar with, that you don't respond back. Phishing is going to be phishing that occurs via the phone, right? So this is packaged hand in hand a lot of times with these different scams. But once the bad actor is able to get their victim on the phone, they may use strong technical language to try to convince their victim of an issue, or they may request remote access to your device. So remote access gives them the ability to see and to interact with your device when they're not physically there. So if you do receive a phone call from someone that is indicating that they're calling from a legitimate company, they're creating a sense of urgency, or it just doesn't seem legitimate, this is going to be a common thing that you hear from me throughout the webinar today. We'd recommend that you immediately cease that interaction. And then kishing, this is a newer one, right? So this is related to QR codes. Oftentimes you're seeing more and more businesses incorporating QR codes. And so what bad actors are doing is they're putting malicious QR codes over legitimate QR codes in an attempt to steal information from the victim. So one thing we recommend with this one is that if you don't have to, you shouldn't scan any QR codes. And if you absolutely have to scan QR codes while you're out and about in public, thoroughly review before scanning to make sure there haven't been any alterations made at that place where that QR code is located. Okay, so I'll briefly talk about elder fraud here as well, and really want to talk about it at a high level because these cyber attacks, they are impacting seniors more than any other demographic, right? And so we get this information from the annual report that's released by the FBI. It's called the Elder Fraud Report. So we're still waiting for them to gather and release the information from 2023. But if we take a look at the numbers here, just some trends here, you'll see in 2020, number of victims spiked at about 100,000. Subsequently, the next 2 years, there was a slight decrease as far as with the number of victims. But let's look at the losses here. So in 2020, we're at a little under $1 billion with losses. 2021, we're about 1.6, and then 2022, we exploded over $3 billion in losses, right? So that's telling us a couple of things as we look at the data. One, less people are being impacted by these types of scams and elder fraud, but those individuals that are being impacted, they're losing substantially more. And so the reason for that, we're seeing a lot of times that those customer service and those tech support scams are going to be the most impactful to the victims. And with those scams, you gain the confidence of your victim by speaking with them over the phone, right? And so that's why we're seeing those attacks having a lot of success. But, romance scams are also scams that are impactful. Not really to seniors, really. I'd say to every demographic, especially with the popularity of, dating applications, things of that nature. So with romance scams, will imitate a male or a female, right, and become like a pen pal with someone, communicate with them for extended period of time to gain their trust, and then there's always the same issue. There's an emergency that's occurred, where they're going to need access to funds that would be the same as cash, and so they're going to ask for those funds right there. So that's kind of how that scam works. Lottery and sweepstakes scams is another one I'll just briefly talk about as well, impacting seniors, right? We see this a lot of times where individuals have been told that they've won sweepstakes, right? In order for them to reclaim their prize for the sweepstakes, they have to pay a fee, right? Obviously, that's going to be that common indicator there, right? You don't normally pay a fee if you win some sort of prize, right? You just, claim your funds. So, that would be that indicator there. So we're not going to go through all of these, but what I will say is that any interaction that you're having, if you're unsure of the interaction, like immediately cease that interaction. Speak with someone that you trust, whether it's a friend, a loved one, a family member. Explain the situation that's just occurred to them to see if they have any concerns about it as well. And then if it is someone that's contacted you and they're claiming to work for a specific company, do some research to locate a good phone number for that company, and then contact them back to confirm if it was legitimate, that interaction that you just had or not. All right, so we'll talk about some additional scams as well here. Let's start by talking about investment scams, right? So with investment scams, individuals will contact their victims with the opportunity, we call this like get rich quick schemes, right? So they're contact you with the opportunity for a great investment, right? With little to no risk and guaranteed high rates of returns. They may even allow you to make smaller investments and provide you with those rates on the return, but they will ask you for a substantial investment. That's how the scam works. And then once you make that substantial investment, you won't hear from them again. So if you are approached about an investment opportunity, our recommendation would actually be to speak with your advisor, right? Just next time you meet with them, and tell them that about the experience that you've had and how you've been approached, so they can provide you with feedback, right? We all know that saying, something normally sounds too good to be true, it normally is. That's definitely would be applicable, with this investment scam. Invoice scams, we mentioned earlier briefly, right? Package hand in hand a lot of time with phishing emails, specifically regarding third parties or vendors, right? So they contact you, indicate that you need to make a payment for services that may not have been provided, and that's how the scam works. One trend that we're seeing associated with these invoice scams, especially via email, is that the victim receives that email with just an invoice in it, right? So there's not any text or any clarification within the body of the email that's received. It's just an invoice and an option for you to pay it. So if you receive an email like that, again, proceed for it extremely cautiously. And then with tech support scams, these occur when bad actors you have a fake pop-up message on your device, right? Indicating that there's an issue with your device. The key indicator with the tech support scams is going to be the phone number, right? So these large IT companies, they're not going to proactively contact you. If they do contact you, I can assure you that they're not going to provide you with the phone number for you to call back. The goal and how the scam works is you call the phone number back. They may say there's an issue with your device. They may request remote access where they could access sensitive information, or they could deploy viruses, or they could deploy something called like spyware where they can monitor keystrokes, right? All these different things. So remember, the phone number is that key indicator, and also remember that you never want to provide remote access to your device to any unknown parties. Make sure you can confirm the identity of that individual before providing remote access to your device. All right, so we'll briefly just touch upon what to do if you fall victim, to one of these attacks. Hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone here, but, with these attacks constantly evolving, it's just good to know what to do. So first recommendation would be to change your passwords on your accounts. If you have similar passwords on other accounts, we recommend that you change those as well. You should also monitor your accounts just to make sure there's not any unusual or unauthorized activity occurring. If you do, or if you're able to identify any unauthorized or unusual activity, that's when we recommend that you initiate a fraud claim. You're going to want to notify your advisor of the incident as well. Even if the incident that's occurred isn't specific to your LPL accounts, you're still going to want to notify them. All right, they can reach out to us here at LPL, and what we'll do is we'll add heightened monitoring to the accounts to prevent any additional fraud. And then lastly, you want to educate yourself. So you're already, taking a good first step today by proactively educating yourself about these cyber threats. Continue to do that so that you can kind of stay in the know. All right, so we'll talk a bit about securing accounts now. So we kind of discussed cybersecurity at LPL, introduced cybersecurity at a high level. We talked about some different scams, different cyber attacks and how they work and how to identify and avoid them. Now we'll just give you tips on some things that you can do to protect your accounts at a high level. So we start by talking about backing up data. There are some different options available for backing up data. I guess I'll start by talking about the cloud. This is probably the most popular at this point in time. And the reason for the popularity of the cloud, it's got to be the convenience associated with it. So when you hear people talk about the cloud, what they're really talking about is what they're referencing is you backing up your data or syncing your data off premises or off site at another location that's held by one of these cloud storage providers. So they spend a lot of money to have different locations really all across the world. These are highly secure locations as well. So when you're backing up data in the cloud, you're just using one of those secure servers at one of those locations to sync your data. And so the thought process with using the cloud is that, and really backing up your data in any circumstances, that if you are the victim of an attack, you can simply just wipe your device clean, right, and upload that data from the latest backup for minimal disruption. But not everyone is comfortable with the cloud, and I completely understand that. So there are some other options that allow you to manually back up your data. So an external hard drive is a good option. If you're going to use the external hard drive, one, make sure that you have encryption on that hard drive so that if it's lost or stolen, the information on it won't be accessed, and then keep it in a safe place so that it won't be damaged. And it's going to be the same thought process with that USB drive as well, right? Make sure that it has encryption and that it stays in a safe place. All right, now we'll talk about everyone's favorite topic, passwords. I was joking earlier with Adam and Christina, right? Passwords isn't always the most exciting topic, but it's really a very important topic, and it's one that you should definitely take seriously, because when we think about passwords, it's really going to be that only risk that you can directly control as it relates to your accounts, right? You control how long and how complex your passwords are. So I guess let's start by talking about what constitutes a strong password. So I do work in information security, so my requirements are going to go a little above and beyond, but my recommendation would be that all of your passwords be a minimum of at least 12 characters in length, and that they have upper and lowercase letters, as well as numbers and special characters included within them as well. So a great way to accomplish that would be to use a password manager. So a password manager, you can think of it as a secure vault that's going to allow you to easily manage complex passwords over multiple platforms. You can have your password manager on your phone. You can have it on your tablet. You can have it on your desktop. You can have it on your laptop. And as long as it's active, you will be able to access the accounts through that password manager. And then the other thing about it that makes it so convenient is that you can create long and strong passwords by simply clicking a button. And so this slide normally gets the most attention in these webinars here. We talk about how long your password is, or how long it would take a bad actor to compromise your password. So if we look at an 8-character password that has numbers, upper and lowercase letters, as well as special characters, 5 minutes, right? Approximately 5 minutes to go through every possible combination using brute force. If we double the length of the password to 16 characters in length with the same requirements, right? Numbers, upper and lowercase letters, as well as a special character, 5 billion years. So that's a stark contrast. And I'll tell you, I'm sleeping much better at night when we think about protecting accounts with that 5 billion years as opposed to 5 minutes, right? And obviously, these numbers aren't exact, and there'd have to be some mitigating circumstances surrounding this, right? Where your username and your password would have to be known. But, I mean, your username would have to be known, excuse me. But when you think about this, it just makes sense to have that longer and stronger password. You kind of get the gist of what we're saying. So I will challenge you a bit. Think about what your passwords are, right? And if your password is in purple or even in red, right? I think it's probably a good opportunity to think about changing your password to a longer or stronger password. So I did mention the password manager. I did fail to mention one point. I'll circle back. With the password manager, you are going to need to have a password that's going to be the longest and strongest password that you can remember to protect your passwords for your password manager. So a good tip or tactic for creating long and strong password that's easy to remember would be to use a phrase. So please, please, please don't use this phrase, as Christina mentioned, done a number of these presentations, and I use this phrase in all of them, right? But make advisors' jobs easy is the example I like to use. You wouldn't know I worked with financial advisors unless you were, a coworker of mine or a colleague. It's easy for me to remember, and I think the best thing about it is that it's 19 characters in length. So on the previous slide, we talked about some tips for creating long and complex passwords, avoiding dictionary words and personal information. So there's some tips that you can do to accomplish that, right? Maybe you replace the letter A with an @ symbol. You could replace an E with a 3, right? You could replace the letter O with a 0. You could add a number in between each word of the sequence or a series of numbers at the end. Whatever your preference is, whatever makes it easiest for you to remember, but that is a good tactic for creating a long and strong password. Now, having a good and strong password is a great start, but we actually recommend that you enable and use multi-factor authentication as well. You may hear that referred to as MFA. Sometimes it's referred to as 2FA as well. But really what it is going to be that authentication process that requires you to complete 2 authentication steps before you can access an application. So yeah, the first step is to verify something that you know, which is going to be your username and your password. That second step is going to be to verify something that you have. So what you're going to have is going to be a unique code. Typically, that unique code is going to be sent to you via a text message. Sometimes it can be sent to you via an authentication app as well, right? But whatever the method is, you just need to verify that unique code to get access to the account. And so if you receive a text message for an account that you're not trying to access, that's probably going to be, that indicator that something may be going on with your account and that you need to do some additional research to determine if there are any issues. All right, so we've made it through 3 of the 4 sections here. Again, I appreciate everyone's attention. I know that these aren't the most exciting topics, right? But they are important ones here. So to close it out, we'll provide you with some tips on things that you can do to protect yourself as well as protect your family at home. So we'll start by just talking about the internet. And the first thing I'm going to recommend as it relates to, internet browsers is to make sure that your browsers and your plugins are up to date. But I will expand on this, and you'll hear me reference it multiple times throughout this section. I assure you, it's very important to ensure that you're using supported software, right? And that you're using the most up-to-date version of that software as well. And the reason being is because a lot of times with all this software that's out there, all the software that's being created, there are going to be flaws within the software, right? As these developers continue to perfect the software and make it secure. What bad actors are able to do is they're able to exploit known flaws and sometimes unknown flaws within software to commit fraud. So by updating the software on your devices, on your internet browser, you hear us referencing the IoTs or the Internet of Things a little bit later. These are going to be like the Alexa products or any product that has a sensors connected to the internet. By using the latest version of software, you really eliminate these bad actors' ability to exploit those known flaws. You should also avoid using any unsecure public Wi-Fi. So unsecure public Wi-Fi is going to be any Wi-Fi network that doesn't require a password for you to join it, or if that password is just plastered on a wall somewhere, right, where anyone and everyone can see it, it's not going to make it a secure network. And there are some risks associated with using unsecure networks. So we would recommend, if you must, you use a virtual private network or a VPN. It's going to think of it as a secure tunnel. It's going to allow you to safely browse the internet. Another option would be to use a mobile hotspot from your cellular phone, from your cell phone, right, or mobile device. Those mobile hotspots will provide you with a secure Wi-Fi network that you can use that there won't be anyone else on. Also, you should consider using credit cards or third-party apps when making payments on the internet, right? We recommend you avoid entering any sensitive information like your routing number or account number, for example, right? Unless it's absolutely necessary. And then if you are going to enter that information, just make sure that it is a legitimate site if you can. So a great tip, one of the great first tips would be to just look at the URL, right? It should start with HTTPS. Just think of the S standing for secure, and oftentimes it's going to be accompanied by a lock as well. Okay, so we'll transition and we'll talk about mobile devices. When we reference mobile devices, we're talking about cell phones, tablets, etc., right? And so, with these mobile devices, there are billions of them circulating around. So I think there's a misconception associated with them that, these mobile devices can't get viruses. They absolutely can. But I think, in my opinion, the bigger threat is that these devices don't actually have a password on them, right? So if you lose that device or if it's stolen, now whoever has access to that device has access to all your sensitive information included in it. So we definitely recommend that you have a password on your device, whether that's a password, a pattern, or a pin, right? Just have something on there. Biometrics is a great feature to use as well. It's going to be that facial recognition or that thumbprint software that's going to allow you to easily join. We talked about updating software. I have an iPhone, right? So I think it seems like, I don't know, every other week I get a notification about the latest software version that needs to be updated on the iPhone, right? It is annoying, but I talked earlier about why it is important to ensure that you update software, and your phones is no exception to that. So let's talk about apps. So we'd recommend that you only install apps from the official app store. And then as it relates to those apps, we'd also recommend, or I'd also recommend that you use those legacy apps, right? So those apps that have been around for a while, try to stay away from those newly created apps if possible. You can also review the comments associated with apps as well to give you some more information on them. And while we're on the topic of apps, if you have old apps that are on your mobile device, my question to you is why? Like, why are they on there if you're no longer using them? You should probably go ahead and delete them from the device. And then also, it's a good idea to ensure that you have the appropriate permissions associated with those apps as well. So a game like Candy Crush, which is a one-person game, shouldn't be requesting access to my microphone. It shouldn't have access to the camera in my device as well. So just make sure that the permissions with those apps are appropriate. All right, so we'll just briefly talk about securing your home. We referenced IoTs earlier, right? These are going to be really any device with the sensors connected to the internet. So those would be the Alexa products. They have grills, toasters, televisions, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, AC unit, HVAC units, right? The list goes on and on and on, right? Never ending list now at this point in time. So, it's okay to use these products, right? But some general best practices, again, make sure the software is up to date. Change the default passwords on those devices as well. And ensure that each device has their own unique password. So don't have the same password for each device. And then if there is an option to enable multi-factor authentication, make sure you do that. And then you may want to consider opting out of data tracking as well if it makes sense for you. When we talk about safely traveling, I always just want to value security over convenience, right? So always stay vigilant. You should never leave your equipment unattended in any public places, right? When you're out and about. You should also consider taking a portable charger with you when you're traveling. I think we all have a different level of anxiety as it relates to the battery power on our electronic devices while we're traveling. There are some minor risks associated with using public USB ports, right? So we try to stay away from those if you can, and then it can just be inconvenient to try to find an outlet to plug into. So by using a portable charger, you can eliminate all of that. You can get 1 to 2 full charges on your device while traveling, and eliminate any anxiety. You also want to learn about local scams. You can just do a quick search for the destination for where you're headed, see what scams are prevalent there, what scams are popular there, so you don't fall victim to them. And we talked earlier about avoiding that unsecure public Wi-Fi. All right, so when we talk about protecting your identity, we're all consumers here, right? Unfortunately, we all have accounts with different companies, and with us all having accounts with these different companies, it's very unlikely that our information hasn't been exposed in some sort of unauthorized access or data breach, right? So a good step to protecting your information is going to be to freeze your credit. It's a fairly easy process for you to do. You can actually just do it directly with the 3 credit bureaus. And the thought process behind freezing your credit is going to prevent any new accounts from being opened using your information. It's not going to impact any of your existing accounts as well. And if you do need to make a large purchase where you need to have your credit ran, you can simply reach out to the credit bureaus to have them unfreeze your credit, right? Work with that company to have them run your credit. And then, the following day, reach back out to the credit bureaus and freeze your credit again. Always review the account activity for any anomalies. If you are able to identify them, as we mentioned before, submit a claim. Think before you click as it relates to phishing emails, right? And then make sure you have appropriate passwords for your accounts. And then we'll conclude the webinar just by briefly talking about cyberbullying, making sure that you protect your family. Cyberbullying and bullying in general has real consequences. There's been far too many, stories in the news over the last 10 plus years really, as relates to individuals doing something impulsive, as relates to cyberbullying. So you want to have those conversations. It's really not appropriate behavior to have. And then on the other side of the fence, right, there is someone that you love or that's going through this, be there to support them so they don't do anything impulsive. One of the ways that you might be able to support them is by following them on social media. I can assure you that you will not win any awards for being the best family member or the best friend, but it does allow you to kind of be a fly on the wall, and ask pointed questions, right? Because we want to ensure that, especially those adolescents in our lives, are connecting with people on social media that they actually know. Um, there's just far too many predators in society. You can just do a search in your area, right? As far as where those predators are. And the last thing that we want would be any of them interacting with, those loved ones in our life. Another thing you can consider doing with your family is creating a safe word or a password. You're not always thinking soundly if you're in the middle of a scam or someone is using high pressure tactics with you. By adding that safe word or that password, it just allows another control or another step that has to be verified before acting on any request. Then lastly, I mentioned it earlier, just continue to do what you're doing by educating yourself and learning about these cyber threats, because they are going to continue to evolve and they are evolving at a rapid pace. All right, we've made it through the webinar. Thank you all for your attention. Just a couple of things I want you to remember, right? We at LPL are committed to working with this office to ensure that your information is secure, to ensure that your information is protected, and to ensure that they have the information that they need so that they can continue to run a successful business, right? Christina and Adam have been great throughout every step of this process for coordinating this webinar. So it sounds like you're in excellent hands. Remember that social engineering is also designed to take advantage of you in your emotions, right? So they won't work without you clicking on some sort of link, opening an attachment, calling a phone number back, right? Remember to value security over convenience with everything that you do. And last, but definitely not least, just remember to be thorough, protect your accounts, and protect your family as well. All right, so with that, we've made it through the presentation. I will stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to Christina at this point in time.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. That was a lot of information, but very easy to follow and keep up with. So I actually have an entire page of notes here. So before I get to that though, why don't we see, does anybody have any questions about what Mike was sharing with us or any stories? Because I have a couple stories even. Nothing? Nobody? Okay. So this is all very timely, and I will tell you why. On Monday morning, probably 9:30, so it was early in the day, early in the week, I got a call from a client who was just with his family last week, doing a celebration of memory of their parents. And the sibling of this client apparently got scammed the week before, and it was through another broker dealer, so I won't use their name. But what happened was is that money was transferred from their account, their investment account, to a bank account not it that did not belong to this person. And then from there, the money was taken. And so the client called and said, "Okay, what precautions do you guys have in place?" And I said, "Well, this is actually a great example of," and you will mention this, Mike. When clients email us looking for funds, we call every single time, right? So we're calling the client back, getting a verbal okay, verifying how much they want, what it's for, that type of thing. And I know that that can be a pain in the behind for some people, and a hassle, but it is, and he realized that too. It is purely for the client's, for, protection. And I know that that one line of defense. So he actually wants to go a little bit further. And if he calls us because he's worried about AI and them being able to imitate voices down the road, that if he calls us, then we are to, when we hang up, call him back on his known cell phone. Um, just to have that added layer of protection. So, I think that's one important thing that LPL does that not a lot of broker dealers put out there as a requirement. So Adam and I are constantly, and our team, talking to the clients, and no money is moved without that verbal confirmation. Adam, I don't know if you needed to add anything to that.
Not to that particular story, while very frightening. I would say that one that I've actually heard of recently, and my wife actually was involved with it, was if someone kind of if you see some of these the scam profiles on social media, you might pop up on Facebook and say, "Oh, I thought I was already friends with that person. I have a friend request from this person. I thought I already was." You just don't even think about it. You accept their friend request, and it's a scam profile. Usually what they're doing is they're trying to go out there and kind of they clone these profiles. They trick people into friending them. They can then clone your profile. And typically what they might do is they'll eventually gain access to your email. They'll change your passwords. They'll change your password to your social media. So you could potentially lose all of your pictures if you don't have them backed up on a hard drive or something like that. So just kind of a word of caution to people, even with, most people take your bank accounts, your investment accounts, all those sorts of things very seriously with security. I would take your social media just as seriously, just to make sure it's not the gateway to more serious things and kind of opening you up to bigger problems. So just kind of an aside there.
Yep. Oh, I've got
Yeah,
another story. There was one this morning. We got a call that a client received an email that was supposedly from LPL, and it said, "So we see you may want to change your password. Please click on this link to do so." And the client was about to click on it and then got very nervous and called us and asked. And so we said, "Don't click on anything. We will call LPL and confirm." Now, um, LPL could not confirm other than to say they would typically not send out an email that says that we see you may want to change. Normally that only comes from, you saying you needed to change it. And so one of the things that we did with this client and that we're trying to do with our clients is get them to switch from the original account view to account view 2.0, which will then have that multi-factor authentication that Mike, you were referring to. So, adding that extra layer, but the client was smart and very quickly is like, "This doesn't feel right," and stopped everything and called us. And so great job to that person.
yeah, that's all you can ask for. As you mentioned, these attacks are just constantly evolving, right? Adam made a great point about social media where, you know, a lot of times it starts with just a weak password, right? And someone gets access to that social media profile. And now they're Adam Robert, right? And you're getting messages from someone that you've communicated with multiple times and you're familiar with it. And so it wouldn't be anything it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary to act on a request from someone that you know, and that's how the success works.
So we had a couple stories there. Does anybody else want to share a story or have a question? No, not yet. All right.
That's
Um,
fine. If they
oh,
do come up in the future, I will say what we mentioned earlier, we have a personal relationship with our advisors' offices. So please, if you want to reach out to Christine or Adam, as I mentioned before, we've communicated multiple times. They'll send me a quick email and we'll make sure that we get you the information needed. I will give you a resource as well because I know I was referencing some different products there as far as with, like VPNs and, cloud services, right? So a great resource if you want to do some research on your own to identify what a good solution might be for you would be pcmag.com, pcmag.com. So let's say we'll continue to use the password manager theme. Let's say you wanted to go and search for what the best password manager is. You just type that in the search field. It'll provide you with a pretty exhaustive list as far as with the different products, pros and cons for each one there as well. And then you can kind of make a decision for, what you think would be the best fit for you. And don't just limit it to password managers. If you have a question really about any sort of software, right? We mentioned VPNs and things of that nature. It's a really great resource to utilize if needed.
perfect. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, then we really appreciate you taking the time, Mike, to share all of this information. Helpful. We'll put it up on our website after we get it through LPL compliance and let everybody click on it and watch it when they want to in order to get more information. And with that, we'll put a top items that we learned today so that way people don't even have to watch the whole thing. They can just look at that and see how it went. But thank you very much for joining us. Great to see all
Well,
of you. And
I was just gonna ask if, as part of that, the slide that Mike had about the length of the passwords, that was a great slide, but I didn't get a catch it. If we could get a copy of that, that'd be great.
Yes, sir. I'll send the PowerPoint to Adam and Christina immediately, and so they'll have it and they can distribute it as needed, sir.
yeah,
Great.
so maybe
Thanks.
LPL will allow us. We'll see when we put it through compliance if LPL will allow us to put that one page on the website too, Peter.
That'd be great because as I'm thinking of all the things that I do and all the things I probably don't do, I probably, after seeing that, it's probably one thing I could probably do that would make me a heck of a lot more secure is add a few more characters to my passwords.
Yep.
You know, I'm not using 16 character passwords, but maybe I should.
Yeah, it's funny those little things that we can do, right? That just make
Exactly.
our lives a little bit easier and safer to sleep. Oh, that is the other thing, right? I don't know if anybody else, but I was sitting there going, gosh, is this going to give everybody nightmares tonight? And then Adam said scary. So yeah, he's thinking the same thing I am.
No, I'm thankful that LPL finally implemented secondary authentication. You remember how many times I asked you about that?
You started asking that probably 6 years ago.
You weren't alone, Peter. You weren't alone.
And that's sad, right? And
Took a long time,
it did take a long time, but you were a very patient man.
but I'm glad we have it in place.
Yep, me too. All right. Thank you all so much, and everybody have a great night. Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Take care.
Thank you very much. It was very informative.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.